Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. I am so excited to have Hannah Brown joining us again. She is a returning guest. If you missed it, you'll want to go back a few episodes, probably 2 months ago, when she was on and we talked all about mothers, daughters, puberty, perimenopause. And today we're even going to dive into dads and men when it comes to understanding our cycle and why it's so potent and powerful for these male figures in our life to understand our cycle, our daughter's cycle, and how we can work so much more cohesively together in a home if everyone starts charting our cycle or living in alignment with our cycle. So in case if you don't know, Hannah Brown is a cycle coach and a social worker. Her passion is to provide support to menstruators to help them reconnect and reclaim their cycle, as well as coach women on how to support children as they prepare for their cycles to begin. As a mom to a daughter who has now entered puberty, and as a woman in perimenopause, she's beginning to dive deep into understanding the trends between these two big transitions and how, as a family, we can all work together to create a menstrual-friendly home or a period-positive home. So welcome, Hannah. I am so excited to have you on here. I always love talking to you, and I cannot wait to dive into this conversation.
Oh, thanks, Kate. That was a lovely introduction. And thank you for having me back. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you about this again.
I know. And I think this is a really important one because I think, well, at least in my day, like this was a topic only for mothers and daughters. And even then it was an uncomfortable topic and it wasn't one that was really explored. And my dad never had a part of it. Like I have a younger brother and a dad. There's just a family of 4 of us. And I remember every period feeling feeling shame, but also feeling like I had to hide it from the men in my house of like burying those pads in the bottom of the garbage can so that nobody knew. And then, the week before my period being a little edgy or maybe a lot edgy and my dad being like, she's going to get her period any day now. And me feeling so embarrassed by it and being like, no, I'm just having a bad day. Like felt like I had to hide my identity in some ways because I didn't want the men in my house. And I felt judged, and not that they judged me, but even in school, like you didn't want boys to know that you were on your period. Like it was just this thing that nobody could know about. And I don't know. And I feel like it has to be different. It has to be different. I am determined to make it different for my daughters.
I hear you. And I think that kind of cultural shift it takes a while. It's not, it just doesn't happen overnight, does it?
No.
But I hear you on that kind of, there's a sense that like somehow we need to protect men or protect males from this thing, isn't it? That they can't really know the truth. And there's this kind of, it is shame, but it's the taboo and the stigma and all of those things. But I think it is slowly changing. But you're right, how we change this narrative and shift the kind of the conversation is from home. You've got to start at home. And I'm really interested in how the kind of conversations and the beliefs that we absorb, or the kind of lack of conversations, the lack of talking about stuff, affects how we feel about our cycles and how we feel about our bodies and how we feel about ourselves. And how we can kind of change the things we can do. They're like quite practical, sometimes quite simple things that we can do in our homes, particularly if we live with males, or people who don't have periods, and I think it's really interesting because my experience, which I think I mentioned when we last spoke, but about my daughter having just started her periods. And actually it's really funny, I was talking to somebody else about this the other day, but when she started her actual bleed a couple of months ago, I wasn't there, and so her dad did have to help her. And interestingly, that's what happened to me. So when I started my bleed, my mum wasn't there, and my dad had to deal with it as well. And so I think there's a real opportunity, because we don't know, I don't go out every weekend
Yeah.
anymore. Now I'm old. But I happened to be out on the night that she started her bleed, and but it was really lovely. Like, my immediate reaction was I wanted to get in the car, like leave the meal I was having with my girlfriends, jump in the car and drive home. And I had to kind of reassure myself that actually her dad knew what to do, and that the fact that I could trust that he would manage that was really special. I really was thrilled for her, actually, that there wasn't like an awkward, oh my God, this is your mum, quick, come home, this is your mum's job thing.
Yes.
Because I think that, that's crucial. And he was brilliant. And he did then the next day take her out and buy her some earrings to like mark the occasion.
Aww.
Which was really lovely. But yeah, but I'm aware that not everybody has that experience, like you've said, like your experience.
Yeah, it is so true. And, I have the Raising Empowered Girls course, which I'm now recording so that way it's available anytime people need it versus just offering it once or twice a year. Just because after doing it the initial time, I was like, this information is so important. And one of the things I love about it is that there's a whole module for dads. And it's just like a quick summary of like, these are the 4 seasons or the 4 phases of the cycle. You need to understand them so that you know how to interact with your child. But also how to be that supportive dad when you have to take that role of mom and dad. And this part of the course was so important because a girlfriend of mine reached out to me when I was created in, and she was like, listen, I'm divorced. And she's there every second week for a full week. And she's getting to that age. And he has no idea what to do. And I want her to feel like she feels safe with her dad, but I want her to feel safe with her dad for this very vulnerable moment, if it should happen there. And then even if it doesn't happen there initially, but how can he support her on those weeks that when she is on it and she's at her house? Because I also don't want to take that opportunity away from him to create an experience that helps get them closer as well. And so that was the first time that I thought about the fact that, you know what, there's dads that are from divorced homes, or, maybe something's happened to mom, or mom's in a hospital, or whatever the case might be. And dad has to pick up those pieces, and how, like, flipping the script and looking at it from their perspective, how it must feel to feel like I have no idea because this has never happened to my body before. And so how can we prepare them so that they feel confident, that they don't feel awkward, and plus how they can really give that beautiful support to their daughters? Because I think it's so important that they have a resource. And let's be honest, men have not been taught, at least none of them I know, about a woman's cycle and understanding it. Hell, I didn't even understand my cycle until I went through fertility challenges to realize there was more than ovulation in a period. So like, I just think there's so much beautifulness in understanding your own cycle and then getting your partner to understand it. And then when you have daughters, I do not think that it's an accident that I had 2 girls and then a little boy, like, especially because I'm on the journey that I am now of struggling with fertility, learning about my cycle, being so inspired by how much we can alter our health and our wellness and our well-being by knowing our cycle, that it was like, my daughters are always going to know this, but if my daughter's going to know it, my husband has to know it. And then my son, he's going to have to know it, because we are very much a period vocal open household here.
Here, I love that. Have you run that bit of the course then, the module for dads yet?
I ran it once, yes.
And you had some dads?
Well, none of them attended live, but they had a pre-recording, so we'll see. I keep test driving things on my husband, though.
That's a really good idea. Well, because I was thinking about this recently. It's like, how do you get to the dads? Because it's quite hard to even get to the women, because you don't know what you don't know. You and I have both arrived at the same place from going on personal journeys, and then suddenly going, how did we not know this about our own bodies? So how do you, like, it's a challenge, I find anyway, to like get other other menstruators to understand the like magic that's hidden.
Yeah.
But so it's a bigger challenge in lots of ways, isn't it, to then
Yes.
bring the men on board.
In this course, that was one of the things that I was worried about. I was like, are they going to attend live? And, running it the first time, it was a trial to see how it was going to go. And yeah, as predicted, I did not have any that attended live. But that was one of the things that really spurred me in wanting to make it a pre-recorded course, was because of that uncomfortableness for some men. Now, however, she did have some male friends who are single dads who she told about, and they were like, yeah, we totally want to learn this, but we don't want to learn all of it. We don't want to learn the women's stuff like in the other 3 modules. We just want to learn the module for dads. And I'm like, but that you're missing the point too, because you have to understand the cycle, and the other modules will also about like how to support them when they're in pain, or what does heavy bleeding mean. And so like, as a dad, you should also know more than just the seasons if you can, especially if you're solo parenting. So that's the next big thing, is I really have to work on how to sell it to dads of all of it is important, not just your little cheat sheet of like, tell me the script of what I should say on this day.
But I guess that's how it starts, isn't it? That once you kind of start having those conversations, then the seeds are being sown. And what I've been wondering about recently, and I think it's wonderful that you're doing this and offering this, by the way, Kate, I think it's really necessary. But I was thinking, how like we hate mansplaining. Like all women that I know have been mansplained too. And I was thinking, God, actually, what we want to avoid is doing it the other way around and being like woman-splaining. I mean, even if I don't even know if that's a thing, maybe it isn't, but like I'm conscious of who is the right person to deliver this. And I don't think that it has to necessarily be men or males, but I've half considered like approaching my partner and saying, do you want to come and like help me do something for dads? And I think that's not really on his it's not on his to-do list, Kate, and fair. Yeah. Like I think he's like, listen, we have to talk about periods all the time anyway. Could we just have a break? I'd be like, please. Yeah. But I wonder, like, I don't know if there are any men or people who don't have periods doing this work, because actually in lots of ways I think they would be really well placed to have those conversations and to say, listen, this is really important and this is why. But I don't know the answer. I don't know if there are any people doing that already, and I don't know if that's necessary, but I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm reading a book right now by Miranda Gray on, what was it called? Why can't I think of the title now? It's for moms or caregivers to menstruating girls. And it's a really great little book. I'm halfway through it. But one thing she shares right in the beginning, which goes to what you're talking to, is she said, don't learn this so you can tell your daughter where she's at in her cycle. Learn this so that way you can be curious and be an investigator to observe where she's at. And then to have an idea in your own head so that you can help guide her, but still allow her to have the opportunity to discover her own cycle and ask you for aid or assistance when she needs it. Because she said in there, nobody likes being told, are you in your follicular phase? Are you PMSing? And so I think that's the other thing that we have to look at with dads, is that we need to give them the information so that they can become investigators and observers, but take the lead from their teens and just have it in their back. And I like how she wrote it. And I don't know specifically how she wrote it there, but it was like, if you see something that may look like one of the phases that's pretty clear cut to you, you just shift your behavior or the way you communicate or your expectations, knowing that that's where you predict she might be at, but don't tell her necessarily that that's where she's at, unless if she asks for it.
I love that. I think that's really clever, and it makes me think about it. It links to some social work stuff that I've been talking about recently in terms of that co-investigative approach, that with children, that we it links to what we were saying in that little chat we had before we started, Kate, about that kind of role of expert, that I think that adults think that they need to know all of the things, and that actually in terms of role modeling, like to role model that we're fallible humans who don't know is really important, actually. And so that kind of, that ability to say, I don't really know, should we find out together? And to kind of take the lead in that co-investigatory approach, I think is a really powerful one. And particularly to avoid that mansplaining thing, because you don't want people to just go, right, I'm going to learn the facts and I'm going to tell you what I know about the menstrual cycle. You're right. It's the curiosity to, I think that maybe I really like the word curiosity, and I wonder whether that's a helpful approach, is that how can you create a period curious or a menstrual curious environment in your home, actually, that we're all just going to get curious about it, about, like yesterday, my daughter, I knew she was in her autumn and she was so like she didn't want to do anything, and when I said we were going for a walk, she was like giving me daggers. It was like it's like I suggested she went down a mine. It was like but actually we were able to then say, oh babe, I think you are in your autumn, maybe you're just feeling a bit blah, and we had a chat about it at the table, and actually that it does change it, doesn't it, rather than me telling her saying you're feeling like this. I think I do a little bit of that as well, to be honest.
I think we all do as
because again, human. And I'm also mindful of not wanting to paint this picture that I've kind of got it all cracked, because I certainly haven't. But I think it's having that openness, isn't it, and having that curiosity.
What it reminds me of? It reminds me of, and I don't know if you guys have this where you live in your part of the world, but I know for like here, 14-year-olds, that's when they get their learner's license to drive a vehicle. And you usually take a course with a driver in one of those cars that the teacher has the brake on their side too. And that's what it kind of feels like when you're navigating this, is like, you're like, okay, well, I want you to drive this car, but when I get worried or when I think I know best, I'm going to slam on the brakes and take over control because I don't trust you yet. Is what it kind of feels like when it comes to helping them figure out their menstrual cycle. And I think in some ways it's the same with the men, is that it's us some ways putting the brakes on for them or telling them how it has to be versus letting them explore. But in order to be able to explore, you have to be open to wanting to know the information, which is why I think it's so important for me. Like the 3 reasons why I think it's so important for dads to know this stuff is, 1, you are able to hold the space for your daughter to create her own identity, right? And by you being able to see that she's 4 different versions of herself and being able to interact with all 4 of them versus, and I think we get stuck like this as parents sometimes, of, I want you to be this mold, right? And I think this is our society. It's like, we want you to be this way. We want you to be a doctor and you're going to have these credentials, right? Like we fit you into a certain little pocket and you're not allowed to explore beyond that. And this creates a window when we look at the cycle of seeing our daughters as 4 different versions and then meeting her there and challenging ourselves to grow as a human being, to be able to be adaptable, to meet someone in 4 different spaces, which I think is really important. The second one is that you remove the shame and the stigma around the cycle when dads get involved, because then it's no longer a woman's problem. This is a human life problem. This is an anatomy issue. This is us just talking about bodies, talking about health, wellness, right? And so we take away some of the sharpness that I think a lot of us have felt growing up, at least in my generation, of that this was a private issue. It's not a private issue. Half the population bleeds. Like, it's just, it's something that we have no control over, right? It is, and yes, maybe to a degree it's a private issue, but it's also an issue that if you wish not to be private, it shouldn't have to be private, because there's no disgust behind it. It just is what it is. So you remove some of that shame. And then the third biggest reason is, I think, like, this is the biggest BS radar ever, is when dads start interacting with their daughter as cyclical humans we teach them what good men can do. We teach them how, the husband or the partner that they're calling in is one that wants to meet them in a relationship with who they are in all of their phases, versus feeling like they have to hold on to that shame, feeling like they have to hide parts in themselves, feeling like they're dirty or that they have to conform in some way. I really truly believe that this is how we start to crack some of the codes, is by having the males so involved in their daughters' lives post-puberty versus just when they're little.
I love that. I love everything that you've just said there, Kate, and the resilience piece as well. Like that really, I loved that. Like that really resonated with what you were saying about all the parts of you, because that's the bit, isn't it? That when you have the opportunity, like we have to an extent, to reclaim all of the bits of you, that's so empowering. But actually, if you can do that, if you're supported to do that from a child, I mean, it's like, it blows my mind to even think about the kind of generation of children that we could be raising who feel like all those bits of them are valid. So the snappy, introverted, quiet, reserved, angry bits that we have spent a lot of, I certainly, and I'm fairly confident that you felt the same, that we've had to hide and swallow down because it's not palatable. That if all of those parts are celebrated, then I mean, you're describing the world that I want to live in, and relighting my fire.
Well,
and that is so powerful, isn't it? It's such a powerful idea that not only it's not only about accepting your own, all the parts of you in terms of your own identities, but have somebody else fully accepting that as well. I mean, that's like,
well, I think even as a woman now whose cycle has figured itself out for the most part, it's starting to shift in perimenopause, but it had figured itself out, was that it taught me how predictable I was, and why, and that I could feel things, right? That it was okay to feel things, and it was okay to have boundaries, and it was okay to not want to do certain things at certain times, right? It was a guide for me to know me better. And I think when I reflect back on my teenage years, my gosh, like the emotional roller coaster sometimes between like not feeling like my friends liked me anymore, which really was probably just me being a little bit more sensitive and overreading everything because we were still friends. Like it was like I took in things. And I think when we don't understand why we're feeling, or we have a guide to being like, this is only temporarily, we allow those emotions or those feelings to imprint deeper into us and take over as part of our identity. So rather than seeing ourselves as, just being premenstrual and worn out or tired or exhausted and having the demands of that, I'm supposed to do these chores, but I don't really want to. And so I'm feeling a little rage, that now all of a sudden we hold that as part of our identity, is that we're always difficult to deal with. Like, why are you such a difficult teenager? Versus being like, this is not the season for this to happen. Maybe we just give some forgiveness, because now I know my body, and I know that I don't cook or clean during my period. I really have no desire. And so to expect our daughters to just push through and do things as well. And don't get me wrong, we need to push sometimes when it's not cycle related. We still have to like have a healthy lifestyle.
To show up and do the things.
But
with more grace. With more grace for ourselves, and an understanding of where we're at. And that's the difference, isn't it?
Such a difference. And I just shared on my Instagram last week, because I just finished my period. For me, one of the biggest ways to show me love when I'm bleeding is to do the things I don't want to do. Right now, we're in the dead of winter, and I don't like filling up my car. I will be that person that runs it to 2 kilometers until empty. I am so thankful that vehicles now have that little dial that tells you how many kilometers you have until you're not going to be able to drive your vehicle anymore. But I'm the same. The limit.
Push. I hate going into I don't want to go in the garage and fill it up. I hate it.
So if you want to do something to show me that you love me, you fill up my car when I'm bleeding, so I don't have to go in the cold and do something that I hate doing. And like, it fills my heart so deeply of like, oh, I got into a full tanked car or a full gassed car, and it just feels so beautiful and so held in those ways. And those are the simple things we can do. Like if we think of a teenager, rather than push them to do whatever it is that they have to do, or push during their sporting events, or push during their homework, versus saying, you know what, you need a night off. Okay. Right. Like it creates flexibility in the world. And I don't think we have enough flexibility in this world sometimes.
I could not agree more. And I 100% agree with you about I think, how do you spot a woman in their 40s? Well, they get really turned on by somebody. It's like the new kick is, if you're going to do something to the car so I don't have to, and you're going to do that without telling me, and you're going to just tell me you've done it. Oh,
I know.
Like if my husband does the same, like if I'm going on a long trip, he'll make sure that there's like screen wash.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my God, he's just filled up the screen wash. Oh, like that is I'm so here for that.
Guess what? It's my birthday this week. To celebrate turning 43, I have 2 special offers for you. You'll want to click on the link in the show notes below that will get you on my email list so that you are the first to hear about these 2 special free gifts that I'm giving to everybody who's on my email list and who's interested. So click on the link below, and this Saturday, you'll get a special email from me on my birthday offering you these little gifts.
I put a post up last week. I was bleeding last week too. I think maybe we synced. I don't know if you saw it, but he washed out my period pants, Kate.
I did see this.
Did you see it? And I was like, I've got to share this, like, because this was such a revelation to me that I'd thrown them in the shower in the night, and intending to be the first one in the shower to wash them out. And I wasn't. And I was like day 2, like bleary. And then suddenly realized that he was in the shower when he popped back with his head around the door and said, I've washed your period pants. And he was like, took ages, because obviously they absorb. They're really good. These ones I've got are really good, by the way. They absorb like a lot. So it took him a while. And I was really shocked that, well, not shocked, but just like really pleasantly surprised that he'd done that, and I felt quite moved actually that he'd accepted me in that way, to that level, that he was gonna, go out of his way to do this for me. I was like, wow. And I shared it with a bit of hesitance, because I didn't want to, I'm really conscious of not being showy offy. Oh, guess what my husband did? But I wanted it to spark conversation and to make people think. And I don't know if you saw, but it did spark some conversations. There was a bit of controversy on that post, which I found fascinating.
Oh, really?
One person was commenting saying, oh my God, I can't believe you're getting the fanfare out here. This is basic laundry. Do you see any blokes posting about how their wives do all the washing? And I was like, oh, I think you've missed the point here. He didn't just throw my pants in the washing machine. And actually he does do most of the laundry anyway. He didn't do that. He literally washed them out. And I found that was moving. Most people were really supportive, and had a lot of really positive feedback. But I found that really interesting in terms of thinking about, that whole gender. There's a whole other podcast in there, isn't there? In terms of the kind of gender division, in terms of or role, how we work out who does what in terms of labor in the house. But that to me is not just laundry.
No, but for me, that was letting go of the fear around that somehow, and this is my own stuff, I know, of that the blood in those underwear is the sign
tainted
of yes, that it's dirty, or that it's it's a sign of something that's never supposed to be seen. My husband does not clean my pads, but
I didn't know mine did.
If he was to touch my dirty pads to put them in the washing machine, I probably would have been like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Right. And that is not, that's not a him issue. That's a me issue. That goes down to the core of some of the shame that I still hold even as a cycle coach, trying to work through that and release that so my daughters never have to face that, where they're like, yeah, it's underwear. He threw it in the washing machine, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful that he just seen it as a way to help support you. And there was no shame. There was no stigma or stereotype or this is a you thing and this is gross. Right. So I think it's beautiful.
And I love that he was just so shocked at how efficient these pants were.
I know.
He was like, they hold a lot. I'm like, yeah. But it is interesting. But it's that's the kind of stuff, isn't it? That's, you know, and I'm not saying everybody needs to go and make sure that their partners wash their period pants out. Like, that's not.
It's to watch for the small things. It's to watch the small things of how your partner supports you as a cyclical bleeding woman. Mine was that he filled up my tank. Yours was that he cleaned your period panties. Both cases, we both felt cared for in a week where we actually feel a little bit more vulnerable, right? Where we feel a little bit more needy and as women, I think we're scared sometimes to ask for that. Like, how can we ask for what is that we need? And this is what we need to teach our teenage daughters, right? Like, especially in school, how can we set boundaries with authority figures around our cycle? So if there's an expectation that we're supposed to provide this big, amazing presentation for a final grade, I always use this example, but we're on day 1 of our cycle. Can we set the boundary of like, I can't do this. Can you reassign me in 3 days? Like, how can we be more open to adjusting? And how can, as girls, we be more comfortable in saying, this is what we need to feel supported, because I can't do that. I'm not going to be my most efficient self doing that. So I think it's a bigger message. It's beautiful.
It is. You're right. Give the permission to say no, or to say not right now, or that doesn't suit me at the moment. And I think that the analogy that I think is really helpful in that part is for non-menstruators is the comparison between the 24-hour clock that I was talking to somebody about it recently, about how, you know, they were scheduling when in their cycle they would be best to go on a date, and saying that they felt that somehow that was like a bit manipulative in a way, and I was saying, well, yeah, I can kind of see how you'd think that, but actually you wouldn't choose to go on a date in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So in terms of like you picking a time in the month when your energy and you feel good about yourself, like it's the same as you wouldn't say, oh, do you know, I'd really, oh yes, I'd love to come and be interviewed for a job, please. Let's do half midnight.
Yeah.
Like, you just wouldn't do that, would you? Most, you know, you're going to do it in the morning when you're most perky and your cortisol and your adrenaline have kind of risen enough so you can string a sentence together. You're not going to do it in the middle of the night. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny. I always use this example because the male hormonal system resets every 24 hours, right? And so if we want to look at their cycle and compare it to ours with a 28-day cycle, this is the best way that most women and men get it. Like, my husband really kind of caught on when I use this example of like my premenstrual, so what you would call my PMS phase, is like when you come home from work and you're like, I just need 10 minutes of like no one bugging me because I just got home from work. I'm just exhausted. I just need to decompress for 10 minutes. And then when you can't get that, usually the guy disappears with his phone and his tablet or his laptop to the bathroom and spends 30 minutes in there. And no guy needs 30 minutes to poop. It's because he wants to get away from life. He wants to be by himself. And that's what we're asking for in our premenstrual phase, because that happens not at 8 a.m. in the morning. That happens at that 7 p.m. time when it's just like the world's too much. So I'm going to go disappear with all of my electronics and go into the bathroom. And so like, my husband's probably going to kill me for this, but this is probably too much oversharing. But the one day I was like, should we build you like a pooping table in here or something? Because you bring way too much stuff in here to escape your children and me. Just feels like, I feel like
you could just say, yeah, you could just say, I need some time on my own. You don't have to hide away.
But you're right. In the bathroom.
So you could just stay here for ages. But you're right, it's the same thing. It's the same energy. I think it's really a helpful way, a comparison, isn't it?
Yeah.
for
But
children as
guys need
well.
that time too. And it's just that we
Mhm.
need a week of it. We don't need 30
Mhm.
minutes. We need a little bit more time. But
At
as we
least a
see with
couple of
women,
days.
we take a lot longer. So
I love that. Um,
yes.
it was making me think, because I've got I think I may have mentioned when we last spoke about some workshops that I did in a primary school for girls in terms
Yes.
of period preparation. Did I tell you that? Well,
Yeah.
I'm going back into hopefully in the spring, going back into the same school and doing some for the boys.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and it's interesting because I thought, oh, I'll talk to Kate about that actually, because they were both times I did these 2 workshops for year 5 and year 6 girls. So it's between like 9 and 11. I don't know if that's the same. If you
Yeah.
have the same, yeah, okay. The boys weren't there, so they went and did something else, and I just spoke to the girls, which I think is really key and really important.
Mm-hmm.
But they were obviously really conscious about the fact that something exciting was happening without them. And they had questions. They had questions that they wanted to ask. Some of them, when I did the year 6 class, so the older ones, some of them were able to ask the questions to the teacher, and they were like invited to do that in a really appropriate way, to ask the teacher or the girls, if the girls felt comfortable to do that. But clearly there was like a gap and there was this need. So I am going back in to speak to the year 5 and 6 boys together. And it's going to be really interesting because I was thinking, oh, right, maybe I need to adapt the workshop that I do with the girls and make it more about, what will your experiences as a male bodied person be in terms of puberty, and what physical changes you're going to be going through. And I was thinking, but I only have like an hour here, and actually, yeah, I might do a bit of that, but I think what I'm going to do, Kate, is just do the same workshop.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, actually, I'm going to do something different here because you're different, I'm going to say, this is literally the workshop that I did with the girls. And this is how, I'm going to talk a bit about the hormonal cycles of men versus women and the moon and the sun. But I'm going to talk to them about, bodily changes in puberty. But then I'm going to do the same bit of the workshop with the, pretend period blood and the tampons and all the products, and hope that that's going to spark the conversations and the questions from the boys about, I just know that they're going to have so many questions, and some will be silly and will be that there's an already, and they've already picked up that there's this thing, this kind of like secret thing that happens to like secret women's business. So I think it's a really crucial and really important point to have those conversations with boys before they get to secondary school. So I'm really excited about it, but kind of interested about or curious. I'm curious and open about like which direction to take it,
Well, it'd be a good test drive to try it one way, and then if it doesn't work, to try it another way. But I think the big thing sometimes is just simply like I don't know, for the guys I've talked to, it seems to resonate a lot more with them when it comes down to understanding that our cycles are very similar. It's just yours is 24 hours and ours is 28 days. Because I find that it's so much more digestible for them, of like, what happens if we asked you at 3:00 in the morning to do this, right? So rather than it saying that this is unfair, right? It's unfair that girls get, I don't know, maternity leaves and menstrual days off of doing chores or whatever, like rather than looking at it that way, going, but that would be like us asking you to do things in the middle of the night. And it's just 2 different hormonal systems that require different things. So it's not special treatment. It's that our bodies completely operate differently. And for us to be the best versions of ourselves, we really have to be able to honor that. And, doing a full circle here as well, I've seen this pop up a few times on Facebook, and then I think I just recently seen on Instagram again. And I don't know where this story originated from. I'm sure someone potentially made it up to make it as like a learning moment for people that they just keep now forwarding it on. But it's the story of how a boy or a daughter shares that she was on the bus, and a boy,
I've seen it.
Yeah, the boy sees that she has blood on her pants, so he gives his sweater to her to wrap around her waist. And whether it's true or not, it doesn't really matter. The beautifulness of it is seeing that someone could protect another one from the outside world of shame or of these things that kind of comes with menstruation sometimes, and how we can really be supportive as a community together and work together and to be the change that continues to create the change. And I really think this is beautiful, especially in our household. Like, my son is the youngest, and I think that that is the best choice for my reproductive system, to decide he was going to be the last one born, because he's going to have two sisters that he's going to have to learn from a
He'll be
young
that boy.
age. Yeah.
He'll be that boy on the bus.
Well, my daughter's 9 right now and he's 4. So let's say she starts bleeding next year. She'll be 10, he'll be 5. So at 5 years old, he's going to be experiencing what it means to be respectful and to be supportive of cyclical sisters and of cyclical women. Like, I don't think he fully understands my cycle yet, but he definitely knows that there's times not to push mommy's limits. But I think it'll be such a great experience for him to grow up, and because I can see him being that boy now, right? Because he's had 2 sisters where he's had, I don't want to say we've trained him, but we have encouraged him to be supportive and to be nurturing, and to see this as something that's a natural process, and that it's something to be respected. And it doesn't make his sisters different or less than, it just makes them. And him being able to be that kind of representation for his friend groups who may not be teaching that in the home. Like, I just think there is an opportunity for so much exposure for him to be part of the change for the men. Just as I think our husbands are that for the older population. Like, I'm sure my husband doesn't go to work and talk about my menstrual cycle with his friends, but I do know that when we go to Christmas parties, it's a 50-50 opportunity that his wife is going to start talking about menstrual cycles.
And so he can join in. He's well versed.
He just supports it, right? He's like, okay, well, this can go one of 2 ways tonight, but we'll see how this ends up. So I just think that, like, the more that we expose boys and men to this information, and the more that we see value in it, the more opportunity we're going to create for the bigger change that I think is needed.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's just reminding me of a conversation I had with my son, who's just 8. And so I think this was last year when he was 7. And it was like, well, some of my favorite conversations with him are like, when you go to bed and they're meant to be going to sleep, and instead they come up with all of the questions about everything, about the world. Like the other night, we had a whole one about religion, and I ended up like searching what the most popular religions were, and anyway, this one was about I think I'd said to him, like, listen, babe, I'm like day 27, and when mummy's day 27, I have more sensitive hearing, so like when you shout, it like actually hurts my ears. So can we just turn it down? And he's quite interested in numbers. Where he gets that from, I have no idea, but he's like really good at maths. Like, honestly, he's not my son in that sense. But so he's like, so if you're day 27 and how many days do you have your period, and how long is your cycle? And I'm like, well, it's about 30 days. He's like, so you'll be bleeding on Tuesday? And he's like, he's really interested in the kind of numbers, like the numerology of menstrual cycles. And then he was asking me, he was like, so what was your best ever cycle day? Like, which is your favorite day? I was like, wow. Like, I had to really struggle to like think about it. It's like, I think I quite like day kind of 19, 20, like just after I've ovulated, and just when I'm sinking into like late summer, early autumn. He's like, okay. And then he's like, well, what was your worst day, mum? Like, what's the worst day in your cycle that you've ever had? I just like couldn't believe that I was having this like conversation with him about best and worst days. But I think that it's in the fact that he's interested and that we can have those conversations is so important to me. And like you've said, that's the kind of partner that you'd want your children, that your daughters to have, a curious, interested, accepting, to have that kind of, to have to hold that space for other girls, like whether they're friends, partners, sisters, mothers, all of whoever that is. It's about honoring and nurturing those significant relationships with menstruators, isn't it?
Yes. And if we want to keep uplifting people to be the best versions of themselves, we have to teach them and teach the others in our lives what that might look like and what it is that we need, and knowing that it's different. And, it's so interesting because way back in my early 20s, many moons ago, before I was in a relationship, before I had kids, I traveled a lot. And I remember in particular, there was this one Habitat for Humanity build that I went on where we were building all these houses in El Salvador. And it was a group of 9 women and 1 guy. I don't know how this group ever came to be, but one wife brought her husband along, and he was the only man. He was the token man on these work sites. But with the habitat builds, you have to build with local people. And so the idea is that we are there to assist them in building these homes. And it was so interesting to watch as women, maybe because we're not in construction, we were so adaptable about, okay, you want to do it this way? We'll just help you. Like, tell us what you want to do and we'll do it. Where for him, it was like, you want me to mix cement? How? Why? This is so inefficient. Can we just not go to a hardware store and get the right supplies? Like, it was so hard. And I remember us all joking about how the biggest lesson we walked away with is that there is a million different ways to do the exact same thing. And sometimes the beauty is stepping back out of how we think it should be done and experiencing it through someone else's eyes of how they would like it done or how they have done it. Because even if it may not be the most efficient, there is a lesson to be learned there, or there is a gift in there. Like, there was a gift in how they did things versus how us North Americans rush through things and try to get productivity as number one versus missing the bigger lessons or the experience of connection, or that it worked for their environment, not necessarily for our weather. And so I always reflect back on that when it comes to the menstrual cycle and girls and boys and men, is that there is a million different ways how we can be successful in society. But there's also some beauty layered in there if we can step back out of our own set ways and see it from someone else's eyes and give it an experience of how they could do it. Because maybe they could be just as productive if we didn't force our ideals on them, right? And so if I tried to make my husband live by a 28-day cycle of how he did things, it probably would not work well. But having men try to make me conform into a 24-hour clock doesn't also work well. So I think there's just a really beautiful lesson sometimes when we step back, and that's what we need to teach our youth. That's what we need to teach the boys and the men, is that this may seem so out of the box and it's never going to work, but don't say that until you try it, right?
That reframe, so that ability to look at it differently. Yeah, it's interesting when you were saying that. I was thinking about links to kind of social work in terms of looking at the world through the eyes of a child. And how that's what I support foster carers and adopters and kinship carers in terms of kind of best practice around caring for children who are in out-of-home care. And a big part of that is the same thing. It's how can we look at the world through the eyes of a child, but also see how you come across. So how to see yourself through their eyes as well. So that's that whole process of that kind of reflective ability to see the world through their eyes, but also to imagine how they experience you and to adapt your behavior. It kind of links back to that thing you were saying about the car analogy. And when you were describing that, I was thinking about a dance, and it is about, how you learn the steps. And ultimately, nobody is born learning the steps to the parenting dance. That you have to learn that as you go, and somebody takes a step and then somebody else responds, and there is a kind of synchronicity and a response that is quite similar to dance. By the way, I'm not a dancer, but I've heard it described like that before, and I think that's how you work it out, don't you? You kind of, if you can see it as you're learning this new dance together, it changes it. That's a reframe. Hey,
yeah. So maybe to come full circle in this conversation, which I think has been beautiful, and we've wove so many different angles in here. So let's come full circle. For anyone who's listening, it's like, okay, well, this has been a great conversation, but where the hell do I go from here? Like, how do I start to get men or boys involved? Maybe we could both share 1, 2, 3, whatever magical number comes to you, of things that you've been doing. Because I don't think either of us have fully the answer. We've just had this experiment of like, we're testing this in our own homes. We're testing this in what we teach. But what would be 1 to 3 things just put that you've been putting into practice that you feel has been having an impact or a shift?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of trying to pull it all together. The cycle tracking piece, I think, is a really interesting one that I work, quite a few of the clients that I've worked with, when I'm teaching them how to track their own cycle. And, you start with a kind of the circular chart that's kind of quite easy and visual. That what a kind of unintended consequence that a few clients have told me has happened is that when they've shoved it on the fridge to remind themselves to daily record how they're feeling on each different day of their cycle, their partners and their children have been able to see it. And that I think that, in a sense, is a really clever, helpful, simple way of creating a more cycle literate environment and cycle aware household and attitude, I guess, is that if you've got it there, then not only can people see where you are in your cycle, but you can start to have those kind of conversations with your partner and with children. I think that might be my first one. So kind of track overtly.
Yeah. And, interestingly, one of my key ones that I use, which is very similar to yours, is I like the circle, like you're talking about, but sometimes life just gets too busy. And one thing I've been doing lately, which seems to be really working in my household, is whether you have a calendar like that you just bought that has the 12 months in it, or you just print off the month. On my day 1, I highlight 7 days with 4 different colors, right? So for my period, I use orange, and it's like, this is the week of my menstruation or my inner winter. This is my spring. This is my summer. And this is my fall. And I pre-plan the month without words yet. I just, like, as soon as I start to bleed, I know that I just highlight 7 days, and I do another 7 and another 7 and another 7 in different colors. And that's our visual aid in the household. It's my visual aid when I'm on the phone and someone's like, hey, do you want to do a play date? And I'm like, not that day. But it's also a really quick reference for my husband, for him to look. And I always do it at the top of the line. But I was thinking about this, when my daughter starts to bleed, it'd be nice for her to have like a line maybe at the bottom, so that they can see where I'm at and where that she's at. And it might be different colors. And it just kind of shifts the perception. It's worked really well in my house because it's just really easy. But for women that are like, I want a quick visual aid, you can just do this on the calendar. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And if you've got a shared calendar, pop it up. Yeah, that's a brilliant example. I love that.
And pick 4 different colors. So it's really just color coded. It's just,
and then it looks pretty. And who doesn't love that?
I know.
I love that. And I guess the other one that I was just going to say was about what we were saying earlier about curiosity. That just being curious and not thinking you have to know everything, I think is really key. The co-investigative, curious approach. And the last one, I guess, is 3 is the magic number.
Yeah.
The third one is just about that openness in terms of, if you are a person with a period, just to have that, to have your period products lying around, that's so important, to have that openness in terms of, it may not be your thing to leave your used period pants in the shower. Fine. But actually, in terms of having, just being really open about products and being open about periods, I just think really challenges that shame.
Yeah, totally. For me, another big one is, they kind of piggyback off of each other, these two, but I think it's really important for my husband to learn, but then also for my daughter to witness, so that way she can start to use it. Is once, like you said, with the circle, once you start charting your 2 words or how you're feeling each day, is that you get to know your pattern quite well. And so for me, like I know when I need to set boundaries. And so it's not a contention point and it's not a big ask in our house for me to call my husband on day one of my cycle, if it magically just starts in the middle of the day, to call and say, listen, you're on supper duty tonight. My period started. Like, it's not like, are you joking me? Like, I've got plan. Like, it's none of that. It's just like, okay, got it. Right. Like, it's now become a routine in our house because I know my cycle and I know what I need. So it's very easy for me to set those boundaries of, and it's created an expectation in our house, just like how I know he needs Tuesday nights for basketball. He knows that I need these on certain days. It looks
day one,
but it's just, it's how it works,
is.
right? And so when you get to know your cycle, you get to know what your medicine is, and you get to be able to ask for that or set boundaries around it, which like last week, my kids wanted to play day and I was like, no, sorry guys, I do not have the energy for it, right? And so it was easy for me not to say mommy's burnt out, is me to say, no, I'm in my inner fall, you guys, like I just don't have the capacity to be able to do it. And they get it. My second tip is that once, just like how you know your cycle, you know what you need, so you can ask for those expectations. Once you know your cycle, for my third point would be, is you know where your weaknesses are and you can better navigate those weaknesses. So for me, I know I get super triggered and I have tendencies of wanting super organization in my house before my period comes. Like I cannot handle that you didn't put the pots in the drawer properly, and I'll probably make it feel like it's World War III in this household. So I know that I get super sensitive with mess and disorganization and sound. And so I've prepared myself for that, in the sense that if my husband triggers me, which he usually does in my premenstrual because of some expectation that I had that's not really fair, is that I do not pick a fight with him. As much as I want to, I tell myself this is going to get you nowhere because you're going to explode. He's going to explode back because he's going to feel triggered. And so even if it's a bigger conflict, I wait until I'm in ovulation. I hold back if I have to. I'll write it in a journal or something, so I feel like then I won't forget it. By entitlement, I am not going to forget how you were not supportive of me. And the
I'm
ways
not going to let that go. I'm just not going to deal with it now.
And then I wait till ovulation, because then ovulation can communicate so much better. And I find we have a stronger relationship and way better conflict resolution if I can bite my tongue for 2 weeks and come out then, because I'm way better at expressing how I actually felt and why it made me feel that way. And sometimes the 2-week wait also diminishes some of the intensity of it. But I can also hear his rebuttal. Like I have open capacity to hear him and what he has to share about that experience and why he did something. And I find that we meet each other so much better. We walk away from the discussion feeling loved and held and supported. Like it's just way different from me knowing what my weakness is. My other big weakness, I can't, like you said, sound amplifies the days before my period. I can't eat dinner with my family. I actually go to another room and eat my supper, and not because I don't like them, but those 3 days before my period, it just feels like I can hear everybody chewing, like, and they're not chewing loud.
And it's like they're doing it on purpose, just to, I know.
Scraping of the forks.
What is that about with the hearing? I am going to do what I'm going to thank you for that, because I am now going to justifiably give myself permission to go and eat it on my own.
And my other thing with it too, and I tell my family this, is that because they're all excited to talk about their day, my husband likes to joke around a lot, and so then he gets the kids riled and everyone's like full of energy, and I'm just like, I want quiet. So I just always say, in order for you guys to enjoy your meal, I need to go enjoy mine somewhere else. You guys talk about your day. You guys be silly. I don't care what you do at this kitchen table, but I'm going to go eat on a different floor in a different room by myself. And then everyone has a better day.
Everyone's fine. I love that. I mean, that is like cycle syncing to the max. I love it. I love that. I've never heard that about saving fights up for your ovulation. I mean, that is real commitment and dedication. Talk about holding the tension. Yeah. Like I am too like, I'm going to tell you right now how I feel. I cannot wait to discuss this again in my ovulation. No, I'm like, I need to put it to bed now. I really admire that ability, that patience, that to hold that, because I am to respond. My authority is to respond in human design, and that is what I do.
Yes. And so when we flip that though, it's also good for dads, or potentially brothers, but I don't think brothers can hold this as well, but dads to hold it of going, she's in this phase. Is this going to do me any justice right now to have this argument with her? Or should I wait until like 7 days from now and then say, okay.
When
I reflect on it, like even yesterday we had some kids over at our house, and my daughter, she was pushing boundaries, and she knew she was, because she knows that I will not shame her in front of her friends. Right. So she was doing things that she knows were borderline enough to create a little bit of angst in me. And so I did not call her out in front of her friends. I just let her have her time. And then this morning I was like, just so you know, that did not go over my head. I was fully aware of it, but I did not say anything in front of your friends because I did not want to shame you. And I did not want you to feel bad in front of your friends, but know that that's not okay. And she was like, you know what? You're right. And I'm really sorry, Mom. And I was like, thank you. Oh. And then that was the end of it. Right. But I had to hold back. And I think as dads with menstruating teenagers, this is a hard one for them, but they have to hold it in, and just be like, this is going to create something this is not going to be something, it's not going to be a learning moment if we do it now.
No, and to get curious and to think, what's underneath this behavior? Where might my child or young person be in their cycle? And how might that mean that they're showing up today? Yeah, I hear you. I think that's really clever. And also, just to pick up on something else that you said, know your own medicine. I loved it when you said that. Like, I just think that's such a powerful sentence. That's what it teaches us, hey?
Yes, I know. And there's so much wisdom here for us all to live together. So women, take this conversation, teach your daughters it, and then start to think about how you can filter it into your life with your husbands and your sons, of like, how do we want them to go into the world being supportive? Because
we can do that. We can create that.
Yeah. And it's not just their daughters. We can create
that world. Yeah.
It's their coworkers, it's their sisters, it's their mothers, it's the 50% of the population that they're gonna have to interact with.
The menstrual allies.
Yeah.
Here's to the menstrual allies.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So, well, thank you, Hannah. This has been a beautiful conversation. I have enjoyed it so much. Thank you for coming back on again.
Thank you for inviting me. I've loved it. I always love talking to you, Kate. But yeah, I think we've covered some ground again, hey?
I know. This might have to be a quarterly thing.
I'd love to talk to you again. But yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Are you excited about aligning to your cycle? If so, make sure that you subscribe to this podcast and like the episode if it really resonated with you. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.